Welcome to another episode of Josephine Meets. And today I am super excited because I have an amazing guest. I have Peter Reginola here, who has tried a lot of different online businesses. And that is why he's so kind of like the perfect person to talk about how to kind of set up the perfect or the right online business. He had been going from a product-based online business to now a service-based online business. And I'm super excited because we're also going to get some really hands-on tips and tricks about email marketing, because that is what Peter does today. He is an amazing copywriter and he has some really great ideas for you to spice up your email sequences. So hi, Peter. So happy to have you here.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. So give us a little bit of a background, because your story, how you came into entrepreneurship, is also not an easy one. So
No.
this whole series is about inspiring others to actually dare to take the leap. So Peter, give us a little bit about background about your story.
Okay, so I was a mechanic for about 21 years, believe it or not. Barely ever read a book, didn't write at all. And then I got into the online business space because during COVID, what a lot of people may not know, mechanics get paid by the job, not by the hour. So with the economy kind of crashing down, it restricted income. So I had to find a better way to make income to support my family. So I got into what was called print on demand first, which is basically coming up with your own graphics and whatnot. I grew up an artist, became a mechanic just by necessity, but I've always been a little bit of an artistic person. So I got into doing graphic design and doing print on demand to sell basically t-shirts. And I got onto Amazon doing that and realized the power of Amazon, because I was able to sell way more t-shirts on there than sites like Redbubble, or I forget some of the other ones, but Redbubble and ones like that, right? And then I got into a few programs about doing what's called Amazon FBA, which is basically like doing drop shipping, but a lot of the work's being done for you. You basically just got to come up with your own products and whatnot. So I got into doing Amazon FBA, while also doing print on demand and working a full-time job. And it wasn't going very well at first. I got on page one rather quickly, but I was burning through my ad spend really quick and I couldn't understand why. And then I fell into what was called copywriting, which I had no idea what it was. And I was absolutely terrible at it at first, but I was able to kind of figure some things out and start making a little bit more money. But then as the whole COVID situation went on, like everybody knows, price of fuel went up basically worldwide, especially in North America, and the cost to ship from China, which where I was getting a lot of my product made for me from, basically tripled overnight. So what used to cost me basically $1,500 to get 1,000 units over to Amazon was now the better part of $5,000,
Hmm.
and it pretty much took all profit margin out of it. I tried to stick through it and I couldn't make it work. So I had to eventually liquidate, but then now I had this skill set of copywriting and marketing that I knew how to do. And I had no idea that you could sell that as a service to other people. So then I found Upwork, and kind of both those situations kind of happened around the same time. I was still kind of running Amazon at the same time. But I knew that it wasn't going to work out. So I was basically just trying to burn through product. That way I could lose money faster rather than really slowly, because I just wanted it to be over with. So I was running the Amazon business, as well as doing the copywriting and working full time at the same time. And that is one thing I will recommend anybody doing when they're coming into doing anything at all outside of what they're already doing, especially if you already have a full time job. Do not go for the shiny object syndrome, which is obviously, like I just mentioned, I suffered from immensely. I burnt out really bad to the point where I had a heart attack at age 37. I was hospitalized, still recovering now almost a year and a half later. But because I was able to do copywriting and Upwork took off in a way, I was able to then make enough income that I was able to basically sustain that. And although I do all kinds of forms of copywriting, basically what I do concentrate on now is email marketing, because it is the number one source of income most of the time once people already start building an email list. If you have any kind of online business or even a service-based business and you're like, brick and mortar, your email list becomes like an asset that basically you own for life. And what a lot of people might not know if they've never heard the stat is typically Facebook ads and Google ads, whatnot. Typically, you're getting like a 6 to 8 to 1 ratio
Yeah,
ROI if you're doing pretty well. Whereas
yeah,
email marketing is a 42 to 1.
yeah,
So that's like exponentially more for the same amount of money putting into it. You can make a lot more money. And that's basically what I concentrate on doing now for a lot of my clients, because a lot of people build an email list and sometimes don't have the time to email it. They run out of ideas, or they have it going and they don't have the time to keep it going. So then I kind of come in and just help refine that whole process for them so that they could start making money without having to burn their own time and bandwidth.
yeah. There is so much to
Helpful.
unwrap here, Peter. Yeah, there is so much to unwrap here, Peter. And I actually want to go back a little bit to your story because you said you had always been a creative. Is
Yes.
that something during your time as a mechanic that you kind of like um did you kind of take care of it, or did you have to relearn it after you kind of decided you want to do something else?
I was always naturally creative. Like in high school, I used to design tattoos. I was in bands. I was a musician, used to play drums, guitar, bass,
Hmm.
used to do a little bit of everything. The only thing I can't do that's art wise is acting. I am terrible at that, but I can draw, paint, sculpture, whatever. So it was something that I never really leaned into much, being a mechanic. I had a kid fairly young. I was 21 when my daughter was born. So basically, it's something I suppressed.
Yeah, yeah.
In all honesty, I stopped playing as much music. I would pick up my bass guitar from now and then, but like being a mechanic, it just destroys your hands, so couldn't play it as well anymore. So it's
Mm,
kind of like a second coming, kind of when I discovered copywriting, because at first I didn't realize that writing could be form of like using that part of my mind. And I get compliments all the time on LinkedIn now when I do my posts, when people are like, how do you come up with these ideas? And I'm like, I don't know, it kind of comes to me naturally, so it's kind of hard for me to actually explain. But the best way to do it is just keep filling your tank, reading and exposing yourself to other forms of content allows you to kind of make those connections in your brain, and then you could just kind of blurt it out, if that makes any sense. But yeah,
mhm.
hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think also kind of like we have to relearn being creative, but also kind of like had to unlearn a couple of things that we
Yes.
did during our time as in corporate or in mechanics. Are there any on the top of your mind? Are there any things that you think, oh, this is I definitely had to unlearn that?
Basically everything you know about grammar and
Oh yeah,
right?
so true.
Like,
And how to structure an
oh
email
yeah.
or a post or
Like
anything.
if you structured a sales page like a thesis paper, like nobody would read that, right?
No,
And
no.
even emails, the way you like, yeah, I would say the best way to not to forget grammar, because obviously you don't want to look like a 3-year-old, but yeah, a lot of the rules that you learned in English class do not apply, especially when it comes to online writing. You definitely
Hmm.
got to break up those sentences, a lot of white space, get rid of commas and put in ellipses every chance you get. Not to the point where it feels like somebody just feels like they're constantly dragging on in your writing, because that gets annoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, like a lot of what you learn in school, you gotta forget and unlearn. And everything I thought about copywriting, because at first I was just like, man, I can't write. It's actually a lot easier. Not trying to make it sound like it's easy, but it's actually a lot easier to write the copy, coming up with the ideas and how you should elicit that emotions. That's difficult.
Mm,
But the actual writing process itself and the way you lay it out is a lot simpler than most people realize.
yeah. And you mentioned that your email list is actually your kind of biggest asset as an online or as an entrepreneur in general. And I totally agree with that. I mean, we've seen outages, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn recently, people losing their access to the social media accounts
Yeah.
for no reason or whatever. And that is why we definitely need to build an email list. But I remember from when I started building mine, and I also have clients when they start building theirs, it's like a huge thing to
Yeah.
actually write an email, because you're, even though you might kind of gather these email subscribers because they have attended one of your workshops or they have subscribed to your freebie or whatever it might be, it still feels as if like, who am I to dare to write, or who am I to write to them? So do you have something to say to those kind of like newbies who are not yet there, who are still kind of like hesitating from whether I should write or not?
It is difficult, and I've talked to a lot of people about it before, because sometimes I get called in and people are like, "Hey, I got an email list," and they just pretty much give me all the information. One of the first questions I ask is, "How often do you email?" And they're like, "Oh, I've never emailed them." And I'm like, "Oh crap." Well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's kind of like having no list at all, because sometimes collecting addresses and leaving them dormant is kind of like not having permission to write to them at all now, right? Because once you start after never emailing them, it's basically you're probably going to hit spam right away. But
yeah,
or they'll hit the spam button, because they'll, if it's been more than a month or two, they're not going to remember you unless they're on social media. Like, let's say people that have been to one of your workshops before, they're going to
mhm.
remember you, and they probably engage with you on LinkedIn, so
Oh,
they know who you.
I get so strange. People, no, I wouldn't kind of bet on that they
Oh,
remember
really?
me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but, but sometimes, yeah. So you
Yeah.
have all types of people. Just, people sometimes just subscribe without really know, or registering for whatever, without even realizing that they do that. But yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. The best way I would say to start, though, is a lot of people talk about figuring out your ICP, right? Your ideal customer persona and all that, right?
Mhm.
Learn who they are. Um, a lot of times just talking to them, like you and I are talking right now, and learning how to, like, basically talk to people, right?
Yeah,
Being friendly. If you have a problem writing, and especially if you're like a coach of any sort, I would recommend recording any calls you do, or even if you were to explain something to somebody, just record yourself talking and get that transcribed and put it on something, and then edit it in copy form, and then just figure out ways to replicate that on your own writing. That would be a good place to start. A personal trainer I worked with or talked to recently, he was talking about how basically he couldn't hire me for financial reasons, but I'm always willing to help people out. So he was like, I just don't know what to write. And I was like, well, think about it this way. I was like, you're excited about what you do, right? And he's like, oh yeah. I was like, you obviously love talking about it. It lights you up. You enjoy helping people. I was like, so just have a conversation with somebody and record that conversation, and just put down what you said on paper, and now that's an internal conversation, and you could basically take whatever question somebody asked or whatever and turn it into notes and stuff in the copy, and then just learn how to replicate that over time. A good way to learn how to write copy is to handwrite proven sales letters and even emails. So if there's somebody who has a style that you really really like, save their emails and just hand copy them out, and that will teach you the cadence and the language and the structure. That way you could learn how to go like, hey, before they make a claim or a promise, they tend to talk about something somebody probably already knows. And the idea of doing that is basically to get people to start saying yes. Not going to get into that because that's like heavy in-depth copywriting skill stuff, but what you want to do is just learn the form and the foundation of good copy, and just hand copy old school sales letters, because those people were like the best at writing copy.
yeah.
Basically because they had to learn how to do that way before there was the internet and all that, right? So they're the people to learn off of. And
Yeah, I
then
also do that kind of like small print screens of, it can be just, a quote, it can be just a couple sentences or whatever,
yeah,
something that triggers where you're like, oh my God, that is so good. I need to copy that or use that in my own copy, or
yeah,
be inspired by how others, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right?
no, not at all. One of
Mm.
the number one things I tell anybody when they're first starting out is find out what magazines people are reading in your market, and look at the front covers, because the front covers typically have the best copywriters ever writing their teasers on the front. Those teasers are your subject lines,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So if they got people who make millions of dollars a year writing copy writing the front cover bullets so to teach people to read the inside of the magazine, and that works on people when they're waiting in the grocery line. Those are good structures and formations to basically take and replicate, and now you're basically getting your subject lines written for you. And one of the other things I like to do is take those formations, go to Reddit, because Reddit, be careful because it's a lots of rabbit holes on
Yeah.
there, but learn the pains people have.
Yeah.
Now you know what bothers people, then go to YouTube, and that's what people go to consume. So then take the language of all three of those with the formations of what's on the front magazines, and basically you have like a plethora of like ways to write subject lines, and you will never run out of ideas.
Yeah.
And then that's best
Yeah.
advice I could give when writing subject lines, to get people to open
Yeah,
them.
that's a good one, because I heard someone else say today that how do I come up with content ideas? And those are really great examples. But if we then we move a little bit step forward to people who already have an email list, and you gave me some really, before we started the recording, gave some really kind of insightful statistics when it comes to an email sequence when we're launching something, because I was there before, and I have clients who are still there who are a little bit reluctant to sending those emails, promoting your offer, people that might have attended one of their launches, and so people are really interested. They want to learn more, but then they kind of like are afraid to promote it. And I even had a former client reaching out to me today saying, "Oh my gosh, almost 40% of everyone who had registered for my workshop unsubscribed. What did I overdo it? Right? Did I overdo it?" So if you give a little bit kind of like, you also spoke about the mind readers strategy, but that's probably a different one. But anyway, if we could kind of unravel those two things too, that would be amazing.
Yeah. The first thing I would like to address, because something you just mentioned, was somebody talked about how 40 people who said that they were gonna register didn't. Here's the problem with asking people, or especially if you're doing surveys, people lie.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately the truth. There was a study done, I think it was in the 60s, and it was done in the US, and everybody knew that back then that you were supposed to read the Bible, right? So they did a survey, and they're like, how many people have read the Bible? And like 60% of the people that got surveyed, they're like, yeah, I've read the Bible before. And they're like, okay. But then when they dug deep, there was actually 10% of that whatever percent that actually did read it. So there's a difference, but people will always agree with things. It's the herd mentality, right? Everybody sees everybody else doing something, just like, oh yeah, that's cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is difficult to swallow. I know it is. It's unfortunately
Yeah,
just
and
what
what I told her was also that those are not your people in the first place. So it
exactly
doesn't matter if
exactly
they unsubscribe from your list. You don't need them. You don't want to have a lot of like dead meat on your email list. Anyways, you want to have the right people on your email list.
100%. I would rather have a email list of 1,000 highly engaged people that are willing to pretty much read everything you have to write, and with the least amount of friction by majority of what you have to offer, than a
Yeah,
10,000 subscriber email list that's half dead, right? Because
yeah,
if somebody's willing to unsubscribe from your email list, they probably weren't reading your emails, or they were just open it to delete it, right?
yeah,
Um, and that's why I always recommend anybody to be polarizing in some way, like have an opinion, something you stand against, because as much as people, like, you're gonna get trolled. That's just the way things are, especially online. So you're always going to have some kind of haters. So you might as well give them a reason to hate you, so that the people who love you even more. Because as soon as you start polarizing people on one side or the other, you will start selling way easier. Like, yeah,
yeah,
it's hard at first, because like words hurt. Let's be honest.
yeah,
Doesn't
yeah,
matter how tough you are. If somebody doesn't have something good to say about you, like that doesn't feel good. Which is going to happen. So be polarizing in some way, stand up, and you will naturally curate the list that you want, because you're going to naturally attract the people for you. And unsubscribes, like we just talked about, like, they're good, because they're people who later on will either hit the spam button, which is going to
hmm,
become a bigger problem as time goes on with the whole new Google rules, right? Like,
yeah,
the
yeah,
last thing you want is people to give spam complaints. So, and even be willing to unsubscribe people yourself, right? So if somebody's replying to your emails and complaining, just be like, hey, you know what? Like maybe this isn't the right fit for you. If you're willing to, I'll hit the unsubscribe button for you, and you'd be surprised how quickly people will turn around and be like, oh, no, I didn't really mean it that way. And then sometimes that's just a soft objection, and then their response, like, then maybe you can curate your messaging depending on how you want it to go. But yeah, unsubscribes are not a bad thing. But yeah.
And if we
So,
could quickly look into that, kind of like sending emails during a sales promotion or something like that. You call it something else. What do you say? You say campaign.
yes.
So the campaign, kind of like 4 to 5 day campaign.
So campaigns, a lot of people will do 5 days typically. And what a lot of people get scared of is you'll do your first few emails, let's say the first day, and you'll get a bunch of sales and you're like, awesome. And then it's like dead zone in the middle. That's normal, because if people know there's a deadline and the deadline's not close, they're not going to act. That's just people. They're lazy. They're not going to act unless you give them a reason to. And you would be very surprised how many sales come in the last day. There's a lot of launches that I've been part of where more than 50% of the sales is made on the last day in the last few hours. So you'd like, it's just the way it goes. And I think we talked about it briefly beforehand too. What I call the mind reader's secret. What you want to do is you want to make sure your launch is actually what people want too, right? Which kind of comes down to proper market product fit, right? You can't sell something people don't want. And the way to make sure people actually want it is by doing what I call, like I mentioned, the mind reader secret. And I actually kind of got this whole idea from a episode from a show I used to watch, which I for some reason can't remember the name, but
I'll talk to you later.
Of course I still can't remember it, but that's just where it goes. So the idea behind it is, and the way it works is, this mind reader, he was on the road trying to get people to come up and talk to him, and he's like, hey, if I can try to guess, like, think of a song, and if I can't guess it, then I give you $20 kind of scenario, right? And people were like, okay, that's an easy $20. There's no way this guy's gonna be able to guess the song that I'm gonna think of. And every single person that thought of a song, he was able to guess. And everybody's like, oh, holy crap, how did he do that? And obviously everybody's sitting there in amazement, because really, how did he do that? And then they show like the backstory of how this happened. And what they showed was how they actually had people from the show follow these people around for days beforehand, before this whole event happened. And what they did was they kept playing these songs at every coffee shop they walked into, every bar, so that they were basically planting the seed of thinking of this song when they went, right? And that's kind of what you want to do with your emails. Before you launch anything, you want to basically kind of feel out. And the way you do that is you talk about these kind of things. Like, obviously when you're doing a campaign for any kind of promotion, you're usually planning this like few weeks to a month, maybe more beforehand. You want to kind of talk about these kind of things way before you launch it, and see how your list reacts to it. Now, if every time you send an email that's kind of teasing the fact of this and it's your lowest open rates, you might not want to launch that. But also what I like to do is make sure that you have a constant feedback loop with your email list. And the way you accomplish this is by having a CTA in your email, every single one of your emails, and not necessarily to click something to buy, but basically to give you some kind of feedback. You could be asking questions, give them a reason to respond once in a while, right? They'll hit the reply button and talk to you, and then they're actually giving you the language too that you can use on them to help persuade them as well. Because that's another thing you want to make sure is that you're actually using the language of your persona that you're selling to. Because if you're not using the right language, then people aren't gonna be very receptive, right?
Yeah, they don't understand it.
So when you get a constant response from people in a feedback loop, they're basically doing your research for you. So it makes it really easy as long as you're doing it right. And as long as you're teasing these things. And also you could price anchor too. You could talk about something that you're planning on doing and how it's probably going to be expensive, like at least $1,000. And then you're also putting in their mind that it's probably going to be expensive and what it is. But then what you're doing is you're creating these seeds of desire, and also the idea of it coming, right? So then you do kind of like a heads up email beforehand and watch the response of that. If everything goes well, then obviously do your promotion. And when you do it that way, you will get more purchases your first day doing that than if you just launched, because then people don't know about it. They don't know to look out for it. They have no idea what it's about. And because you've been teasing the idea for a while, now they're open to it, right?
Yeah.
And what you do, especially if you price anchor them by saying, hey, this is going to be like $1,000, they're going to go in thinking that it's going to be like expensive. Now, if it's a $200 thing, now they're like, oh, this is cheaper than I thought, and I want it. They're going to buy it a lot faster, right? And what you could also do is what's called like time compression in your campaign, knowing that your campaign, if you do a 5 days, that there's a dead zone in the middle where people are typically not going to buy. Just accelerate that. Cut a day, another or two out, right? Like if you know, if you go 5 days and you open it on Wednesday, then or open it on Monday, then Wednesday is probably going to be like dead zone. Like you're probably not going to get much sales, and it's just wasted energy anyways. You could do like the heads up email Monday, give people a heads up, whatever. Launch it Tuesday and then close it Friday or even Thursday, right? And then when you do that, make sure you're emailing a lot, because you'd be surprised how many people will buy the last, like we've talked about before, like the last minute before. So like you could send like a 15 minutes left email, people will buy. You could send 10 emails the last day, and the more emails you send, the more you're gonna make. Yes, you will have people that unsubscribe. You might get a few spam complaints, but those are people who aren't receptive to your messaging and probably never going to buy off you anyways, right? If they're not if they're not okay to listen to what you have to say with the written word, they're not going to want to listen to you talk, and they're not going to buy something off you either. So just get them off your list. There's no sense having them there.
Exactly. And not to be afraid of actually sharing it more times, because there are also
Yes.
different objections, different styles we need to meet in the different because we can't send an email that kind of like has everything in it. It needs to meet different kind of like objections and different kind of different ways to actually meet or see them. But the funny thing was, I remember one sequence that I did, or a campaign I did, and I sent out so many emails, and it was a post, I think it was like a 3 or 5 day workshop that I had held. And I got this email from one person, and it was probably like email number 5 or 6 I sent out. And this person was like, what is this about? And I was like, oh my God, independently, if you think you've been so clear, crystal clear, it should be
Yep.
like, there are still people who don't get it, right? So always think in terms of, how can this be clearer than because for us it's so crystal clear, because
Yeah.
I've been in this process for so long, and
Yeah.
then to maybe read it through once again, is this really crystal clear? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've all been on that Zoom call before where everybody's been told it's going to be recorded, and then somebody asks if it's going to be recorded, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So
Yeah,
people don't pay attention. Like you will send like like I said, you could send like 7, 10 emails the last day. You could do a 5 day campaign and send a minimum of 2 emails every day, which totals 15, 20 emails in less than a week. And you will have
yeah,
somebody email you the next day when it's over and be like, oh, I missed this.
yeah,
Right. Like it's
exactly.
just like you don't need to be scared of upsetting people, because 90% of people aren't paying attention.
Yeah, yeah,
So yes, be clear with your messaging, and even when you do that, you will have people that still have some kind of objection or a question. So be receptive of that. That's why I like obviously have a lot of pre-written emails, but be open to the fact that as you get feedback from your list, if people are asking questions, to maybe rewrite some of those emails to address those objections. Because if somebody's got that question, you can guarantee you there's probably another 50 on your list that have that too, that aren't open to actually asking. It's just you didn't answer that objection, so they're like, okay, well, this maybe not might not be right for me, because I'm not sure if it's going to work for me because of this reason, right? But somebody
yeah.
had the balls to actually say something. So then you're like, okay, crap, like I need to
Address this.
address that, right? It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, yeah. These are so really cool things, and I think that people really need to rewatch this and write down step by step what it is that you're sharing here, Peter, because this has been really really good. How can people connect best with you? Where do the people reach you the best way?
Um, I'm currently building a website, but it's not ready, and I don't really have a domain purchase, so I'm not even gonna mention that because I'll probably be sending people to the wrong direction. The best way to connect with me anyway and follow me is on LinkedIn. It's just
Yeah,
my name, Peter Reginella. I will be probably coming up. Well, not probably. I will be starting my own email list to help people out even better and to connect with me. I'll probably come up with my own offer so that people can like basically get to the point where I can help them better. Because I have a lot of people reaching out to me now where they're like, "I want to hire you. I like the way you write. I've seen your emails, but I can't afford you yet." And I'm like, "Well, how best do I get you to that point? Because I want you to be so busy that email's not your first thing you think about, and that hiring me makes sense." So I've talked to a few people and they've given me some ideas of like how to help them best. So I'm probably gonna be coming up with some resources to help them out. And basically, if that's gonna help them, it's probably gonna help everybody too. But
yeah,
best way to connect with me is definitely on LinkedIn.
yeah.
That's
And
where
I'll make sure
I'm the
that
most
we
active.
add. Yeah, we'll add Peter's link to LinkedIn underneath this video so that you can click on that, connect with him, because he's not only an amazing writer, he's also kind of really good person to be connected with. You're super supportive on LinkedIn. And that is also key when we build our businesses, to have these
Yes.
supportive people around us who can like returns the favor of commenting, sharing audiences, and that is actually key. So make sure you connect with Peter too. Let him know that this is where you saw him, because then we also know that this actually helps people, because that is the intention, that we get to share the messages, that we get to help people with whatever it is that they need help with. If you have any questions when it comes to email marketing or when it comes to starting your own service-based business, add them underneath this video too, and we will be able to address them. So thank you so much for watching until the end, and I look forward to seeing more of you going forward, Peter, and to connect with all of you who's watching this. Thank you so much. Bye.